Hello, I'm very privileged today to be joined by Emma, and Emma Harvey is a lecturer, assessor and IQA at Suffolk New College. So welcome, Emma.
Thank you.
Very happy to be able to talk to you today. And the focus of today's conversation really is going to be around early years and technology. And for me, when I think about early years and technology, I think my first reaction is, oh, okay, so when we're working in early years, is it important that we have a digital awareness? And I have to think about that and think, yes, absolutely. And the world has changed so much, hasn't it? And when I think about when I qualified and the skills that I use now, not very well, but the skills that I have developed in IT are kind of essential digital skills in the work that I do. We're holding this conversation, for example, with the use of technology. We wouldn't be able to do it otherwise. And of course, with the COVID pandemic, and we were sort of channeled a little bit quicker than we might have wanted to down that technology road as well. But when we think about the sorts of digital skills and the awareness that practitioners should have when we're working in early years, we don't necessarily see that as part of that core qualification. And I wonder whether we should, because when we look at the skills that the children have, and the eagerness that the children have in that digital world, and compared to perhaps the skills that we might have as practitioners, it can be quite contrasting even in those very early years. And also, of course, we have to accept that we are moving in that world and keep up with the technology to be able to get the most out of the learning environment as well. So I know you've been doing a lot of work, Emma, with early years and technology. So first of all, if you could tell us what you think about early years and technology and the significance of that connection, and then if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about your key findings, that would be great.
Thank you. So yes, as you say, I've been doing quite a lot of research and work in the use of technology in settings, and it's really come from two aspects really. So from my early years practitioner background, so I've been in early years for the last 26 years in various roles. So early years practitioner, childminding, working in primary schools. So lots of different roles there, but also as a parent as well. My three children have been born into this digital world and I've seen them develop those skills at home. So both of those aspects have brought me to this interest in how children use technology. And there's a couple of factors, one which you mentioned, and the changes to the EYFS, which started in 2018, and the new version that's just been released last year. And many practitioners will know that technology has been removed from the framework. So from the areas of learning development, the early learning goals, it's been completely removed. It's also been removed from the development matters framework as well. So when I saw that that was happening, I started to wonder what practitioners thought about that.
Yeah.
Did they think it was going to change how they offered provision for technology? And what were their views on children's use of technology in general? So in 2018, I started some work on research for my PhD. And I wanted to, as I say, really find out about what practitioners thought. Coming from that background of being a practitioner, I wanted to find out their views.
Mm.
So I had some sort of aims for my research. One of them was to find out what practitioners thought about these changes to the framework, and then to find out about their training. As you say, many people trained many years ago. Mine's nearly 30 years ago, and I found that many of the practitioners who participated in the research have had their main qualification a long time ago. So I wanted to find out about their main qualification and any subsequent CPD that they've done, and if it included any aspects of technology to help them as the practitioner in their role, but also to support the children in learning how to use technology as well. So there's lots of different factors that we need to think about when we're talking about the use of technology in settings. It's not just about how the practitioners use it for marketing, for communication, for selling their business products, for tracking and monitoring children's progress, for communicating with outside professionals, to working with parents and keeping in contact with them. And then again, you've got the working with children, so supporting them in being safe in using technology, using it for creating rather than just consuming. So many children will use technology at home to watch videos, play games, that sort of thing. And that's more consuming the media. So we need to think about how we can teach children and support them to use technology in a creative way. So we've got to be able to understand how we can look at those two different aspects of using technology and how we can help the children in that aspect as well. So there's so much to look at when we're talking about the use of technology. It's just such a huge area.
Absolutely. And what you said there about consuming, because I think I'm probably a consumer, and then I will actually I know what I need to know to be able to make
Mhm.
things work for me. And I think as an early years practitioner, we need to be very mindful of that digital world. You know, you mentioned that digital world, and children, you know, have got digital rights, haven't they? They need
Yes.
to be able
Yeah.
to sort of make the most of that in a safe way, because you also, you know, we've got that core line of safeguarding in there as well. So when you were doing your research, what sorts of findings did you conclude?
So, as I said, started in 2018, and I started my data collection in 2019, just as the pandemic hit. So originally, I was going to be using face-to-face focus groups, and I did one lovely focus group with a group of
Oh,
practitioners, and we got some lovely data. But unfortunately, that was the only one I was able to do. I then had to change to telephone interviews and research online, again using technology. But I managed to get 103 participants to share their experiences and views, which is amazing.
yeah, well
Um,
done.
so the main for me, the really important parts of it were that in terms of qualifications, 97% of my participants were qualified to level 3 and above. So very qualified, very well educated, and over half of those had a degree as well. So they were level 6 graduates. So they had all had some training. Their main qualifications were level 3 and above. But 68% of those 103 participants said that they don't recall having any aspect of their training which was about technology use. So lots and lots of practitioners who have
Mm,
done qualifications in early years, but there was no element which included how they use technology and how they support children to use technology. And again, some of them qualified 30 years ago. So you can imagine well, you can remember what the content was like then and how technology has changed. So
absolutely.
that was really important in terms of the qualifications that they've done. And in terms of CPD and post qualifying training, only half of them said that they had had some input about using technology, but the main content was about online safety. So lots
Yeah.
of practitioners have had online safety training, but that's it. There's
Mm,
no use of technology in pedagogy. There's no use about bringing technology into the ecology of the classroom. So there's no how do we input technology into what we're already doing as such. It's about how do we do it safely. So I think
mm,
there's a big gap there that we need to address in terms of main qualifications, but also updating and keeping people knowledgeable about this, and when things change, how do they find out about it, and who's the person responsible for making sure everybody knows what's going on, and how they can keep their settings up to date with those changes, and how they can really help children to understand how they're using technology and how they can do it safely. So that was one of
mm.
the real findings for me was about the existing training that's going on, and how we need to address that. And then the other big thing for me was that during COVID, obviously, lots and lots of people were using technology more for their role in their practitioner role. So it was things like keeping in contact with parents when they were all on lockdown, and the
Yeah.
children were coming in, and they were sort of in bubbles and isolating and that sort of thing. People were using technology a lot more. But practitioners, and particularly managers who responded to my research, said that they had identified some gaps in practitioner skills for things like using nursery software, for being aware of their digital reputation, their digital footprint, things like boundaries on social media and social networking. People were not very sure about how they can keep themselves safe, how they can make sure that their settings reputation was kept safe. So there's lots of areas where managers were identifying that practitioners could maybe have some more training and information to help them to use technology as a practitioner.
Mm, that's really interesting, Emma. Thank you. I think it was staggering. I made a little note. 68%
Hmm.
of the cohort that you actually involved
Yeah.
in your research were saying that they had little or none,
Yes. Yeah.
in terms of digital training,
Yeah.
and the fact that actually we don't use or bring in digital training into the core
Mm.
early years qualifications, or indeed supporting teaching and learning
Yeah.
qualifications within our suite. So it's interesting, isn't it? And what we need to do is really embrace what you've said, I
Mm.
think, and the fact that we are entering a world where children are going to see that digitalization as being an absolute priority for them,
Yeah. Yeah.
because this is part of their world, and a very important part of their world, socially and academically. So we
Yeah.
need to respect them, value that, I think.
Yeah.
The safety issues will always be paramount,
Yeah.
absolutely. But I wonder what we could do, looking at your research, thinking about those key findings, and what we could do to maybe develop something. And of course, there's options that we could talk
Hmm.
about. So absolutely. And I know we've had conversations around the development of a regulated qualification, so that there is CPD in that very formal way,
Yeah.
and there's also conversations that we can have around resource development. And this is something that I just want to share with you, and see what you think about this sort of
Hmm.
idea. And I'm just wondering, it was again around what you said, who's going to work in the settings to be able to help the other practitioners
Yeah.
to keep up with digital awareness, or to
Yeah.
be not frightened of it, but to embrace it, because I think there's a lot of fear as well
Yes.
if you're
Yeah.
not familiar with something.
Yeah.
So bringing that familiarity and making, giving that confidence and that leap of understanding, if you
Yeah.
like, amongst the early years community where it's needed.
Yeah, I think that usually in a setting you will have some practitioners who say, no, I can't do it and I don't want to learn. And that's absolutely fine. And then you will usually have one that's quite competent with using technology, or very interested in it, or very enthusiastic. And they would be the ideal person who would say, okay, I'll look at this and then I'll help everybody else. And it's very similar to the panko role, where
Yes,
somebody takes that lead and champions in it for the rest of their team. Somebody who feels happy and comfortable. And what we don't want to do is make this something else that practitioners and settings have got to do. It should be
exactly.
something that's going to be helpful for them, and it's going to support them. It's not another. So we know that they've got enough to do anyway. Practitioners and
Absolutely.
settings have got so much to do. They're so busy, and we don't want to make this something that's going to be, oh, we've got to do this now.
Yeah,
It's got to be supportive and beneficial to
yeah,
the setting and the practitioners and the children and the families as well, because it could be helpful
absolutely.
for parents and families too.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I think what we could do, and what we should carry on our conversation around, Emma, and outside of this short conversation as well, is to think about a resource
Mm.
that looks at perhaps some criteria that you think, these are the standards, or
Mhm.
these are the sort of areas that an IT champion in early years should feel confident
Yeah.
with, and we're not going to assess with that, but we're going to reflect on that,
Mm.
and almost define a role of an IT
Yeah.
champion.
Yeah.
And in that way, we're raising confidence, aren't we? And somebody would take on that role, just as they
Yeah.
do with the
Yeah.
panko role, for example,
Yeah.
and be able to share that information with their colleagues,
Yeah.
and maintain that sort of digital awareness. I think that would be a
Definitely.
wonderful thing, and also something that could be cross-cutting across all qualifications at
Yeah.
all levels for
Definitely.
students.
Yeah.
Be- because our students, of course, and regardless of age, are entering their qualifications in that digital
Yes.
world.
Yeah.
They're expecting some form of
Mm.
digitalization, and I think that's really important. And so it would be good to have something that could actually follow a student on their journey, and
Yeah.
they could perhaps come out of that with, I've also met the
Yeah.
the standard for the IT champion, and that sort of working towards something like that may be something that will have a greater impact on a wider sort of community, professional community within early years and beyond. So that sounds like a really good
Yeah.
um,
I
good
think
idea
I'd
to
like to
take
think of it
forward.
as a sort of toolkit. So they've got all of
Yes.
these strategies and these resources that can help them to say, yes, I feel confident in monitoring the policies of our setting and making sure that they're really robust in terms of how we use technology, how we consider to be using it safely. So I've got tools to help me with that. And I've got tools to
Mm.
help me do the audit of the setting to see what we've got in our setting and how it's actually helping the children and whether we maybe need to consider revising our resources for the children. So having those tools and resources available to them to use as and when they feel that they can and they need to, rather than saying you've got to have this qualification and this person in your setting. As I say, more of a supportive um,
Yes.
role that's there for them to use as and when they think they need to.
Yeah, wouldn't that be wonderful? Let's keep that vision and let's keep that alive
Definitely.
and reconnect and make that resource into some reality. So I look forward to working with you moving forward,
Thank you,
Emma.
and to you.
But for now, I just want to say thank you very much and thank you for your time, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Emma.